coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, a day after the North Korean leader's seemingly conciliatory gesture towards the South. President Park tells the UN chief that 2014 could be the start of an era of peace on the Korean peninsula. Seoul's defense chief, however, orders the military to stay on alert. Ahead of the winter's peak power consumption period, 3 of the country's nuclear plants will return to operation after they were suspended for 7 months for containing parts with fake quality certificates. Plus, security forces in Iraq are fighting Sunni jihadists in the country's west who claim they have been politically marginalized by the Shia-led government. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Friday, January 3rd. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul. Will the new year bring about a new era of inter-Korean relations? President Park Geun-hye says she will make greater efforts in 2014 to realize peace on the Korean peninsula. Her remarks came during a New Year's phone conversation with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on Thursday, one day after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in his New Year's address, delivered an unexpected conciliatory message to South Korea. President Park also said that no country should be allowed to hurt regional neighbors by breaching trust and urged the UN chief to help pave the road for global peace and cooperation. Those remarks are seen by many as a rebuke of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who last week visited the highly controversial Yasukuni War Shrine. South Korea's defense chief, however, has warned the country needs to better prepare for possible provocations from Pyongyang, despite the conciliatory tone of Kim Jong-un's New Year's address. Meeting with military brass on Thursday, Defense Minister Kim Kwan-jin emphasized the importance of enhancing Seoul's defense capabilities. His remarks follow the North Korean leader's New Year's message, in which he called for improved inter-Korean relations. Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Min-seok shed more light on Pyongyang's possible motivations, saying the North frequently takes a softer line with the South when faced with hardships, but tends to act more belligerently when things don't work out as planned. Over in South Korea's central administrative city of Sejong, the government kicked off the new year with its first meeting of 2014. Our Hwang Ji has more on how the year-old city moved a step closer to becoming the central administrative hub for Korea.
The Korean government held its first meeting of the new year on Thursday in the central city of Sejong. It was the first time the meeting was held in the new administrative city. The meeting, led by Prime Minister Chung Hong-won, was also broadcast live at the central government complex in Seoul. The government's annual New Year's meeting has been held in Seoul for the past 40 years, but starting this year, it will take place at the government complex in Sejong. Around 600 officials that represent government entities in the new administrative hub took part in the meeting. Prime Minister Chung said the nation's administrative system is at a turning point.
Despite the difficulties we face with the government office relocation plan, we should consider this as a chance to advance the nation's administrative system.
Around 10,000 officials from 31 ministries and state agencies, including the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Ministry, are now working in Sejong following the second phase of a government office relocation plan that wrapped up last December. The new administrative center is the legacy of an election pledge by the late President Roh Moo-hyun in the early 2000s that aims to diminish the focus on the nation's capital and achieve balanced regional development. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
At the nation's presidential office, President Park has no plans at this point in time to reshuffle her cabinet. At an emergency news conference on Thursday, Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Ki-chun refuted speculation that the president could replace some underperforming ministers in her second year in office. The presidential office reportedly called the press conference out of concern the rumors would distract ministry officials at the start of the new year. Political watchers, however, took note of Kim's word of choice in the press conference, as he said there were no plans right now for a reshuffle, possibly leaving the door open for one down the line. After 2013's heavy political wrangling, lawmakers are now setting their sights on the upcoming June regional elections. As stakes are high for all parties, our Kim Hyun-ji reports on the all-out efforts to win voters' hearts.
The ruling Sunni party is determined to win a landslide victory in the June local elections, in which more than 3,900 local government seats are up for grabs. It plans to harness all party resources and energy for the elections in a bid to empower the Park Geun-hye administration. As the first regional elections under the Park administration, the June elections will serve as an interim evaluation of her presidency.
It's time for us to pull up our collars and approach the public with a humble heart and integrity. We must make 2014 a year that guarantees a bright future for the party.
The stakes are particularly high for the main opposition Democratic Party, which suffered a string of election defeats, starting with the 2012 presidential election. It plans to appeal to voters by accusing the Park administration of worsening the people's livelihoods and the nation's democracy.
In addition to protecting democracy and the people's livelihoods, we need an election victory this brand new year.
The Democratic Party recognizes the need for all-out reform and strengthened internal unity, as it has not only the ruling party to battle, but also a new party led by independent lawmaker An Chul-soo. An is pushing ahead with plans to form a third party that he says will overcome the old politics of the two-party system. His new party is fast gaining popularity in the southwestern Honam region, which has long been the Democratic Party's traditional power base.
The old system and way of thinking that wants to keep its vested rights by settling for regionalism and refusing to reform itself while talking down on the other must be eradicated starting in the Honam region.
An's new party is sure to split the opposition vote, but An has stressed that he won't merge with others, like he did in the 2012 presidential election when he unsuccessfully joined with the DP to try and get their candidate Moon Jae-in elected president. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday that 3 of Korea's nuclear reactors will soon resume operations, giving relief to fears of a nationwide power shortage this winter. The Nuclear Safety and Security Commission approved the resumption of the Shin-gori reactors 1 and 2 and Shin-Wol-sung reactor 1. The 3 have been shut down since May after safety certificates for control cables were found to have been fake. Now, with newly replaced cables in place and after regular checkups, the 3 reactors are expected to be fully operational by the end of next week. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok has expressed concerns about the weakening Japanese yen. Speaking at the government's first meeting of the year on Thursday, Hyun promised to support small and medium-sized businesses in 2014 so they can weather the impact of currency fluctuations. The minister added he would rather reduce existing tax breaks than raise taxes. Hyun also emphasized that economic policies will focus on boosting domestic demand so regular working people can feel the benefits of economic growth. Now, speaking of changes in 2014, here are some of them that will affect the financial sector this year as the nation aims to provide consumers a friendlier, safer environment to carry out their day-to-day financial activities. Our Yuri-an has more.
These are the fake 10 billion won checks that were cashed in the middle of last year. A jaw-dropping incident that proved that forgery on a large scale is still possible to this day. 10 billion won translates to roughly $10 million. To prevent further counterfeit checks, financial authorities have decided to adopt new security-enhanced designs.
We have made the letters that read cashier's check change color. Depending on which angle it's looked at, the letters will be either purple or green.
At the beginning of next month, ATM machines will no longer accept magnetic stripe cards. People will have to use what's called integrated circuit cards, or IC cards, to prevent people from using magnetic stripe cards that were duplicated from the original. As for cash advances, the terminology will change. Cash advance services using credit cards will now be called short-term card loans. This is to make it clear to consumers that the service is a type of a loan and not a cash withdrawal service. Now, 2014 also proves to be a better year for those that own domestic automobiles. Auto insurance for domestic cars will be slashed by an average of 2.9%, while those that own imported cars will pay more by an average of 11.3%. Finally, financial authorities have strengthened the penalty for accounting fraud. Presidents of companies or executive-level personnel found guilty now face up to 7 years in prison and $65,000 in fines. Yurian, Arirang News.
The nation's state-run rail operator is making headway in normalizing train services following a 22-day-long union strike that ended earlier this week. Korail operated services were running just 75% of normal capacity on Thursday, the first official workday of the year, although all union workers were back on the job. Subway services are scheduled to be back to normal on January 6th. All other train services will be running at 100% by January 14th. Train ticket reservations for the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday will begin next Tuesday as planned. Meanwhile, Korail CEO Choi Yeon-hae said Thursday that in order to regain the people's trust, disciplinary action will be sought against those responsible for leading the strike. More than 20 people were killed in 2 separate attacks in Iraq Thursday, and yet another sign is Sunni militants linked to al-Qaeda are making a resurgence in the country. Officials say a truck bombing killed at least 19 in a city north of Baghdad as security forces and allied tribesmen battled to put down an uprising by al-Qaeda-linked militants. In a separate attack, a minibus exploded in Baghdad, killing 4 and wounding 6. Violence has intensified since April after the Shia-led government launched a deadly crackdown on a Sunni protest camp. Earlier this week, the United Nations said over 7,800 Iraqi civilians were killed in violent attacks in 2013, the highest annual death toll in years. Dozens of scientists and tourists who spent over a week abroad aboard a vessel trapped in Antarctic ice have been rescued following an international effort that had been thwarted multiple times due to the region's unforgiving climate. 52 people who were left stranded in Antarctica over Christmas and the New Year were safely rescued by a helicopter from a Chinese icebreaker. The group were then taken to an Australian supply ship. The Russian research vessel Academic Shukalsky got trapped in a thick ice floe on Christmas Eve while on its way toward Antarctica. The 22-member crew is staying aboard as the ship is not in imminent danger, but it remains immobile. Hospitals here in Korea are reporting a surging number of flu patients ahead of the peak of the flu season in January and February. Dozens are warning the public to stay on high alert to prevent outbreaks of the influenza virus, even if you've already had your annual flu shot. Our Polly reports.
Here in Seoul, a local medical clinic has been experiencing a sharp spike in patients suffering from high fevers, chills, and other flu-like symptoms. Freezing temperatures over the past few weeks have exacerbated conditions for potential influenza infections, with young children and senior citizens at the highest risk of complications.
Due to my severe condition, I collapsed. I couldn't even get up in the middle of the night.
The rapid rise of flu patients across Korea is expected to prompt health authorities to issue a nationwide influenza warning soon. Korea is expected to boast the highest rate of flu vaccinations in recent years, with about 15 million people getting vaccinated this winter. Even though annual flu shots remain the most effective way to reduce your chances of infection, they don't guarantee protection from every viral strain. Doctors say it's also important to recognize flu symptoms from that of a common cold, as the virus can leave your body vulnerable to secondary infections such as pneumonia.
In the case of a persistent fever and worsening symptoms, you may in fact be suffering from influenza. Since there is a chance of catching secondary pneumonia, it's best to first go to a hospital and get diagnosed.
In addition to vaccines, strict personal hygiene is your next best bet in preventing the spread of the influenza virus. Wearing masks when going outside is recommended, as well as frequently and thoroughly washing your hands with soap. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And a good Friday morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean national football team. Now, with all the overseas players headed over to their respective clubs, players from the K-League Classic and the J-League will be headed overseas in preparation for the World Cup. Now, starting on the 13th of this month, Hong Myung-bo and crew will be headed over to Brazil to kick off their training before making their stops in Costa Rica, Mexico, and the United States. Now, the team will return to Korea on February 3rd with Gwangju Evergrande's Kim Young-kwan deciding not to take part in this training. Meanwhile, a couple of players will be joining the squad for the first time. And shifting over to the majors, where the latest fantasy baseball rankings had the two Korean players ranked in the top 100. Now, the newest member of the Texas Rangers and 32-year-old Choo Shin-soo is ranked 36 in the MLB fantasy ranking, while Lee Hyun-jin of the LA Dodgers is ranked 98th overall. Now, fantasy baseball is a game where people manage a roster of Major League Baseball players with the participants competing against one another, using those players' real-life statistics to score points. Now, the fantasy ranking shows how good a player is in the actual season. And moving on, good news for all you mixed martial arts fans out here in the nation. Now, we might finally have a UFC event here in the nation. Now, according to Mark Fisher, the UFC rep for Asia, Korea might host their very first UFC event late this year, or at least at the latest early next year. Now, with more and more Korean fighters joining the UFC and the growing number of people watching the UFC here in the nation, Korea is becoming an attractive destination for a UFC event. And while the actual date hasn't been set, Fisher stated that because of names like Chung Chang-sung and Kim Dong-hyun, ticket sales won't be a problem here in Korea. And moving on to some Thursday night's KBL action, we had one game that took place last night as Ulsan Mobis Phoebus took on Jeonju KCC Aegis. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, first quarter of the game, Mobis off to a nice start here, take a 20-17 lead before Tyler Wilkerson leads the way for KCC as KCC rallied back to tie this game at 43 going into halftime. But in the third quarter of the game, Mobis offense lights it up here, outscoring KCC 26-19. And despite Wilkerson finishing off the game with game-high 29 points and 10 rebounds, Mobis hangs on to take this game 89-84. And now finishing things off in the V-League, we had one game take place as well as Kepco Vicstorm took on Russian Cash Vespit, so let's take a look at the highlights. Now going into the game here, Kepco looking to end their losing streak as they powered through in the first set, 26-24. But the red-hot Russian Cash bounced back in the next three sets, sweeping the last three sets 25-19, 25-20, and 26-24. With Arpat Baroti putting up 28 points, Song Myung-geuk 18 points, and Kim Gyu-min with 14, as Russian Cash escaped last place with a 3-1 victory. Well, with all that said, that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Happy Friday morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, it was a bit windy yesterday, but mild and sunny overall, so I hope you get to enjoy the nice weather condition yesterday. Well, the unseasonably mild weather condition looks set to continue today as well. In fact, today should be the mildest day of the season. The afternoon highs will be about 5 degrees higher than seasonal norms, but morning lows are starting out at minus side here in the Seoul and surrounding area, but daytime highs will soar rapidly as we go through the day. Well, we're expecting a good amount of sunshine throughout the day, so I would say it could feel like early spring, but I cannot suggest you to enjoy the weather condition today if you're in the central region and Jeollado, because the toxic smoke from China will sweep the nation once again later in the afternoon. So people in the central region and Jeollado, you might want to wear a face mask before heading out, and we will see a haze with a high level of fine dust particles in the later afternoon. So once again, be sure to wear a face mask before heading out, and the northern parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do might see a mix of rain and flurries later in the afternoon. And it looks like winter weather outlook remain mild for much of the country through the weekend, so it will be a good idea to check out some of the winter festivals that are being held nationwide this weekend, and I will introduce you some on my next weather report. And it looks like the 1st January cold snap will return later next week, so let's enjoy this mild condition while it's here. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. Seoul is starting out at -1, but the afternoon highs will peak to 8. That's about 4 degrees higher than yesterday. While Daegu and Gwangju wake up to daily low at 1, but will get up to 11 and 12 respectively. And Busan will enjoy double-digit daily high at 13 with a good amount of sunshine. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like people in Jeju will have a late fall-like temperature or early spring-like temperature at 14 in the afternoon. But morning low in Daejeon and Dokdo start out at -1 and 3 respectively. But both regions will have the same afternoon high at 9. But Mount Kumgang will wake up to chilly morning low at -10, but will get up to -2 later in the afternoon. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Enjoy your morning commute and hope you have a wonderful Friday. And don't forget to join me again for another updates afternoon.
And those are the stories we're following on this Friday edition of Daybreak. Thank you for being with us.